The agenda which I'm going to cover today is why Section 6, why there is a need of Section 6 in the Indian Income Tax Act. Then we will discuss about scope of total income, how the total income tax depending upon the different types of residential statuses. Then what are those tests of residential status vis-a-vis an individual? And then we will move on to amendments which are brought in by the Finance Act 2020. These are basically three amendments. First amendment is with respect to explanation 1B, which carves out certain exceptions from the definition of a residential status. Then a new deemed residency test has been introduced in the Income Tax Act. We will discuss that in detail. And lastly, we will discuss about the amendments to the NOR, not ordinary resident provisions of the Income Tax Act. And at the end, we will look at some practical issues. Moving on to the first topic, why Section 6? So for that, let's look at the basics, the charging provision of the Income Tax Act. Charging provision under the Income Tax Act is Section 6, which enables the government of India to charge tax on the income of every person. So mind you, the word used by Section 4 is income of every person. Here, the Indian Income Tax Act does not use the word like citizen. So income of a person is taxable in India. He may be a citizen, he might not be a citizen of India. This term person is further defined in Section 2 to include an individual, a partnership firm, a company, body of individual, etc., etc. Now further, there is Section 5, which is also charging provision. It provides scope of total income, which is taxable in India, depending upon the residential status of a person. So Section 4 says that income of every person taxable in India. And then Section 5 says which income of that person is taxable in India, depending upon his residential status. Both these charging provisions does not give definition of a residential status. For that purpose, the Income Tax Act introduced Section 6. Section 6 basically lays down various tests for determining the residential status of different person. So in a way, Section 6 is a bridge between Section 4 and Section 5. Moving on, Section 6 classifies an individual into three categories. Mainly there are two categories, resident and non-resident. This resident category is further divided into two subparts, ordinary resident and not ordinary residents. We will discuss all these three categories in detail in our subsequent slides. So friends, as I mentioned, residential status is different from citizenship. The tax in India is levied on an individual irrespective of his citizenship. So a US citizen might be taxable in India, and an Indian citizen might not be taxable in India depending upon his residential status. So citizenship has never been a criteria for tax incidence in India. The Finance Act 2020 has brought in citizenship into the tests for determining the residential status, but still this is not a condition for levy of tax. Moving on to the next topic, scope of total income. Now, this may sound basics of income tax, but I'm discussing this Section 5 here with the purpose that the types of the different categories of income which are taxed in hands of different category of residents, we will use this in our subsequent slides. Now, first look at the left-hand side box, which talks about Section 5, subsection 1, which says that for an ordinary resident, all income from whatever source which is received or deemed to be received in India, which accrues or arises or deemed to accrue or arise in India, or which accrues or arise outside India. These three categories of incomes are taxable for ordinary resident. Mind you, if we go deep into these three categories, it covers almost all types of income for an ordinary resident taxable in India. Wherever he is earning an income, wherever he is receiving, this income is taxable in India. The bucket is so wide. That's why we say that for an ordinary resident, global income is taxable in India. Now move on to the middle bucket, which is section 5, subsection 1, read with the proviso. And this is relevant for not ordinary resident NOR. For all NOR, incomes from whatever source which is received or deemed to be received in India, this is same as condition A for ordinary resident. B, accrues or arises or deemed to accrue or arises in India, this is also same. Now C, which is highlighted on the slide, this is special. C says only that income arising from or accruing outside India, which is derived from a business controlled or a profession set up in India, that income is taxable for NOR. So this NOR is a special kind of category. It might be only in India, may not be found in any other jurisdiction, this NOR category. Why the legislation brought in the NOR category and why this special kind of income which is taxable for NOR? So NOR are generally foreigners who are staying outside of India. They come to India maybe for personal purposes, maybe for business, tourism, maybe for any other purpose. But they overstayed beyond the threshold which is provided for non-resident, and they somehow become a resident. They might have overstayed purposefully, they might have overstayed because of some health exigencies, or the nature of the work was such that they had to stay. For example, a person who is living outside India, he came to India to dispose of his property, and the property transaction took more than 182 days and he had to stay in India. Those kind of persons who were otherwise not taxable in India or who were otherwise not resident of India, but they somehow overstayed in India and they become resident. So the Indian legislation do not want to tax their global income. For them, income which is received in India and which accrues or arises or deemed to arise in India, only those incomes are taxable. Plus, if they have a business setup in India or they have a profession which is controlled from India, that income also Indian legislation want to tax, and rightly so. If they are running a business from India, that income should also be taxed in the hands of these people. But if they have any foreign income, that income is not taxable. Moving on to the last bucket for non-residents, section 5 subsection 2, it says that all income from whatever source which is received or deemed to be received in India, or which accrues or arises or deemed to accrue or arise in India, only that income is taxable. It means only India source income is taxable for non-resident. Their foreign source income is non-taxable. So friends, kindly keep these three buckets in mind because we will use them in our subsequent slides. Moving on, some important points for applying section 6. The tests under section 6 applicable to the previous year for which status is to be determined. So section 6 is year specific. So residential status is to be computed under Income Tax Act year on year basis, and residential status for 1 year cannot be presumed to apply for the subsequent years. So if for financial year 1920 a person is ordinary resident of India, it does not mean that for 2021 also he will become resident. We need to calculate his residential status every year. Further, residential status under Income Tax Act is different from residential status under other enactments like Foreign Exchange Management Act, Companies Act, GST, and other acts. They also have the definition of residential status for a taxpayer. Here in this presentation, today we are talking about residential status under Income Tax Act. We are not talking about residential status under other acts. There the time threshold which are given under other acts might be similar to Income Tax Act, but we are not dwelling upon those. We are restricting ourselves to Income Tax Act only. Further, important point regarding residential status is that consecutive stay is not mandatory. Aggregate stay is relevant. What does this mean is that if a person came to India in April, in May he went back, and from June onwards he is staying in India. So it does not mean that his stay should be counted from June only. his stay for April, June, and for the further period till he was in India, that should be clubbed together, it should be aggregated, and then it should be applied to the time threshold, which is provided in section 6. Further, and last, the purpose for which a person is visiting India, that purpose is not at all relevant. A person might have come to India in the month of April as a tourist for sightseeing. Then he went back, and then in December took an employment in India and then started living in India. So when we apply the time threshold or the tests under section 6, we need to calculate, we need to aggregate the period he stayed in the month of April as well, even though it was not for employment, it was for his tourism purposes. But the purpose of his stay is not at all relevant under the Income Tax Act. Keeping these things in mind, let's move on. The interplay of residential status under Section 6 of the Income Tax Act vis-a-vis double taxation avoidance agreement. So friends, as we all know that India has more than 100 tax treaties signed with different countries. Under the tax treaties also, the term residential status has been used, and tax treaty also gives definition of residential status. But we all know that due to the provisions of Section 90, subsection 2 of the Income Tax Act, tax treaties overrule Income Tax Act. As per Article 1 of the tax treaties, this applies across the board for all the tax treaties of India, that DTAA is applicable only if a person is resident of at least one of the contracting states. So this is the underlying principle to claim a benefit of a tax treaty. That person should be resident of at least one of the contracting states. For example, if a person wants to take benefit of India-Singapore tax treaty, he should be resident either of Singapore or India or both as well. But if he's neither resident of Singapore nor India, then he's not eligible to claim benefit under India-Singapore tax treaty. And if a person is resident of both of the contracting states, like as I said, India and Singapore, mind you, it's possible in tax treaty because tax treaty does not give any time threshold for the test of residential status. There are different criteria, and my friend Anshul in his presentation after me, he will dwell in detail about what are the tests under the tax treaties and how the tiebreaker test is applied. So tiebreaker test is applied when a person becomes resident of both of the countries, but we need to narrow down him to resident of only one of the contracting states. Then how do we do that? That is tiebreaker. When there is a tie, how to break that? Moving on, the residential status under section 6(1). So before we look at what are the changes which are brought in by the Finance Act 2020, it is very important let's go back to what are the provisions are as prevailing as on date. So this is section 6 subsection 1, which is relevant for individual as existing as on the date, means prior to Finance Act 2020. Section 6(1) had 3 clauses, A, B, and C. B has been deleted, so there are only 2 conditions, A and C. Purposefully, I have kept them A and C because I want friends you to remember clause C and the conditions in clause C, because we will use section 6(1) clause C again and again in subsequent slides. Now let's look at what are the tests given in clause A and clause C. Section 6(1) says that an individual is said to be resident in India in a previous year if he satisfies either of the 2 conditions. So there are 2 conditions, A and C. If he satisfies any of them, he becomes resident. What is the first condition? A. If he stays in India in that year means for the year for which we are determining his status, for an aggregate period of 182 days or more, then he is a resident of India. 182 days means more than half of the year. If a person stays in India, then he is resident of India. Now C condition, the C has 2 limbs. The first limb is that if that person stays in India within 4 years preceding that year means the year for which we are computing his residential status, 4 years preceding that year, if his stay for those 4 years is 365 days or more, and it means the second limb also should be satisfied. In that year, his aggregate stay is 60 days or more. Then also such a person become resident of India. To summarize, condition C has two limbs, 60 days in the relevant year and 365 days in the four preceding years, 60 plus 365. If he satisfies this condition as well, then he becomes resident of India. Now, the Finance Act 2020 has brought in changes with respect to this clause C. So clause A remains as it is. Moving on, there are some explanation. There are two explanations to section 6.1, explanation 1A and 1B. Both these explanations carves out some exceptions from clause C of section 6.1 as we saw previously. Now look at what are the exceptions under clause 1A. Clause 1A says that if there is a citizen of India who leaves India, it means there was a person, first he was citizen of India and he was, this 1A presupposes that he was already in India and now he's leaving, exiting India. Why? For what purpose? First, as a member of crew of an Indian ship, or for the purpose of taking up an employment outside of India. In such a case, the period of 60 days as prescribed in subclause C shall be substituted by 182 days for the previous year in which he leaves India. Now, let's go back to this clause 6. So clause 6 had two limbs, 365 plus 60 days. So to satisfy clause C, his stay in that relevant year should be at least 60 days. But if a citizen of India is going abroad to take up employment outside India, then this 60 will be substituted by 182 days. What does this mean? This means that the moment we substitute 60 by 182 days, then this clause C become redundant because he will move back to clause A. So we, in such a case, we can presume that there is only one condition, which is 182 days and the relevant year to become a resident of India. I hope I'm clear. Now let's start looking at what are the amendments by the Finance Act. As I mentioned earlier, first amendment is with respect to explanation 1B to section 6.1. Now let's first look at what is explanation 1B as existing on the day before Finance Act 2020. So section explanation 1B reads as any individual being a citizen of India or a person of Indian origin PIO who being outside India. So this is important, being outside India. So 1A was case of a citizen who was in India and he was going abroad. 1B is the case of a person who was abroad. He is a citizen of PIO. He was abroad and now he's coming to India. He comes on a visit to India. Why he comes on a visit to India? Then the provisions of subclause C shall apply in relation to that year as if for the word 60 days occurring therein, the word 182 days had been substituted. So in that case as well, a citizen or a PIO who lives outside India, but he comes on a visit to India. In that case, the 60 days condition under subclause C shall also be substituted by 182 days. Now look at this clause C. So for such a person, this 60 will be cancelled and 182 days should be read. What does this mean? The implication are same as in case of explanation 1A, that such a person will also become resident only if he stays in India for at least 182 days. It means more than 6 months he should stay in India. Now this was the condition of 182 days replacing 60 days. That was the bone of contention of the first amendment by the Finance Act. The Indian government thought that this 182 days is too high a threshold for a person who otherwise lives outside India and comes to India to tax such a person. because the 182 days means more than 6 months. And in today's world where the people are mobile, global people, it's very easy to breach this 182 days threshold. People are very easily able to manage their stay in India in such a way that they never touches this 182 days threshold in India and still run their businesses or earn income from India so that they do not become resident and their Indian income does not become taxable. So government thought that let's reduce this threshold of 182 days to some extent. Now, how they propose? Now look at finance bill. The finance bill said that when it was presented in February 2020, that an individual being a citizen of India or PIO who being outside India comes on a visit to India in any previous year, then the provisions of subclause C shall apply in relation to that year as if for the word 60 days occurring therein, the word 120 days had been substituted. So what is the effect? That earlier provision was replacing 60 by 182. Now they will replace it by 120. So what does this mean? This means that a person who is citizen or PIO who otherwise lives outside of India, and if he comes on a visit to India and stay in India for 4 months, then also he will become a resident of India, provided his stay in preceding 4 years was 365. Thus, the first limb of clause C, assuming that limb is getting satisfied. So only a stay of 4 months in India will make such a person resident of India. And as we have already seen our section 5.1, in case of resident, the global income is taxable. So once this finance bill was presented before the parliament, as you all might have followed, that there was a lot of hue and cry, and especially the people who are living in Middle East, they raised concern that 4 months is too low a threshold. A person can come on a visit or on to spend his holidays, to spend time with his family, his parents in India. 4 months is too low a threshold. So it will catch a lot of people and they will fall under the tax net of India and who are already enjoying no tax, especially Middle East people. So it seems that government had listened to the concern of these people, and now I would like to look at the how this was diluted by the Finance Act. Now the changes have been made in explanation 1B, but they how they have been diluted, how the finance bill was diluted. Now look at this. This is how explanation 1B has been worded by the Finance Act and which has become a law as well. Let's read it. Finance Act said that as explanation 1B from 1st of April will be read as under any individual being a citizen of India or a PIO, same condition as earlier as old law, who being outside India comes on a visit to India. This is also same, no change in any previous year. Then the provision of subclause C shall apply in relation to that year, as if for the 60 years occurring therein, the words 182 days had been substituted. So till this word substituted, the law is same as it used to exist before Finance Act 2020. Now the next from the word and onwards, which is highlighted in bold, these are the new words which have been added in the law. Let's read them. And in case of a citizen or PIO having total income, now mind you friends that total income, this kind of terminology has for the first time introduced in the Income Tax Act. A citizen or PIO having total income other than income from foreign sources. It means India sourced income. How much? Exceeding 15 lakh rupees during the previous year. Then for the word 60 days occurring therein, the word 120 days had been substituted. So it means that the finance bill tried to levy tax on all citizens and PIO who are visiting India and stays for 4 months. But they diluted this to and restricted it only to those citizens and PIO who have first India sourced income, Secondly, that India sourced income is at least 15 lakh rupees. Then only the word 60 days in clause C will be replaced by 120 days. So in a way, the government has tried to to uh, uh, to accept the concerns of the people who are, say, working as a carpenter or a driver in Middle East, and uh, and they will not be taxed in India. They will not become resident unless and until their India sourced income is at least 15 lakh. Now, this provision between the Finance Bill and the Finance Act, why this was lower down, why this 15 lakh threshold was introduced, there is no discussion. Probably no discussion happened in the Parliament before passing the Finance Bill. Before, there were no discussion why the government is bringing these changes. So we don't know why they have lowered it down. Sound it seems that government just listened to the concern of the people, and there is no clarity why a threshold of 15 lakh. To my mind, why 15 lakh? Because as per the prevailing slab rates for individual, from 15 lakh onwards, the income start taxable at the maximum rate of 30%. So government might have thought that if a person in India is earning 15 lakh, it means he's like a high income earner, or he's like a high net worth individual, HNI. So let's cover these provisions only for those people. Rest of the people, let's forget. For them, the law remains same as 182 days as previously. Very well, friends. With this, we now move on to the second change with respect to the deemed residency. So, a new residency test has been introduced in the Income Tax Act. This is clause 1A. Now, look at this test was introduced by the Finance Bill as well. Finance Bill said that notwithstanding anything contained in clause 1, an individual being a citizen of India shall be deemed to be resident of India in any previous year if he is not liable to tax in any other country or territory by reason of his domicile or residence or any other criteria of a similar nature. So memorandum explaining the finance bill said that there are a lot of stateless people existing. They said stateless people are those people who are they are citizen of India, but they manage their stay in India and other countries in such a way that they do not become resident of any country. Friends, in most of the countries, the test for residential status is based on time. In many countries, the test is either 182 days or 183 or somewhere near 180 or 6 months criteria. So it's very easy for people to breach this threshold. A person may split his stay in 3 or 4 countries and do not become resident of any of those countries and avoid the taxation in all of those countries. So government thought that let's try to catch them. Let's increase our revenue and let's try to tax these. Let's bring these stateless people under the tax net. So finance bill said that any citizen of India, he shall be deemed. First of all, this is a deeming provision. Secondly, it starts with not standing anything. It means a non-obstante clause overruling subsection 1. So whatever is subsection 1, forget it. If a person who is citizen of India and he is not liable to tax in any other country, then he shall be deemed to be resident of India. So there were a lot of hue and cry with respect to this provision as well, that India is increasing its tax jurisdiction too deep to tax any person who is citizen of India just because he is not liable to tax in any other country, he should pay tax in India. It's too much. Government has in the Finance Act has diluted this provision as well in the line of explanation 1B. Now let's read Finance Act 2020 1A. 1A now, which has become a law as well, it reads as under, notwithstanding anything contained in clause 1, an individual being a citizen of India having total income, now the income threshold has been introduced, which was not there in the finance bill. Other than income from foreign sources, means India income exceeding 15 lakh rupees, same threshold as in explanation 1B, during the previous year shall be deemed to be a resident of India in that previous year if he is not liable to tax in any other country or territory by reason of his domicile or residence or any other criteria of a similar nature. So this condition is same as it was prescribed in the budget, but they have lowered it down and introduced the income threshold as well. So a citizen of India, he will become resident of India if he has India sourced income of 15 lakh and he is not liable to tax in any other country. So this 1A is very interesting, friends. First of all, citizenship has for the first time became a criteria for a residential status in India. It was never there. It was neither in the Income Tax Act of 1922. Though income threshold used to be a criteria in 1922 Act, when it used to say that if the Indian income is more than the foreign income, then the person become resident of India. Now, in the 1961 Act, income threshold had never been a criteria to determine a residential status of an individual. For the first time, Finance Act 2020 has brought in a threshold of 15 lakh Indian rupees to determine the residential status of an individual. So the reason behind this, to my mind, is again the government wants to catch those HNI who are stateless, who are not paying taxes, who are citizen of India. They might be running a huge business empire in India. Just by managing their state, they were not able to tax they were not liable to tax in India, and the government was not able to catch them. Now, holding a citizenship of India and Indian income of 15 lakh, the government will get a right to tax these people, and it's rightly so. Government is likely to increase its tax base and revenue a lot by the provisions of clause 1A. But my dear friend, the objective sounds to be that to tax those people who are living outside of India, holding citizenship of India, and bring in into the tax net. But to my mind, the way clause 1A has been worded, it has brought in some interesting scenario, and it has brought in, it will not tax some of the people who were previously getting taxed in India. I will discuss that in detail when I move on to issue number 1.
Sharadji, one query is there.
Yeah.
It's from CA Puneet Mata. In deemed resident person of Indian origin is not covered as, please explain.
Yeah, this is very interesting that in 1A they have covered only citizen of India, though in explanation 1B citizen and PIU both are covered, but in 1A only citizen of India are covered. What are the implication of that? PIU is supposed to be a person. PIU stands for person of Indian origin. He's supposed to be a person who is living abroad, and he comes on a visit to India. But a citizen of India, for 1A, citizen of India is getting taxed. That citizen of India may be living in India, he might be living abroad. If you notice that there is no state threshold for 1A, only threshold is citizenship and the income of 15 lakh, Indian income of 15 lakh. He might be staying all through India, means whole of the year. He might not be staying even a single day in India. The idea to introduce was to catch only those citizens who are living abroad. But the way they have worded it, even if a citizen who is already living in India, that person will also fall under 1A, and he will not he will not fall under clause 1, because it starts with notwithstanding anything contained in clause 1.
Sure. Please.
Yeah. Now, let's look at the third amendment which has been brought in by the Finance Act. This is with respect to not ordinary resident. So conditions for a person to become NOR are contained in section 6, subsection 6. So as I mentioned earlier, that once a person becomes resident, we need to further look into that whether he is ordinary resident or NOR. The conditions for NOR are given in section 6.6. If these conditions are not satisfied, then obviously a person becomes ordinary resident. Now look at what are the conditions for NOR as existing in the Income Tax Act. There are two conditions. it says that a person is said to be NOR in India in any previous year if such person is A, an individual who has been a non-resident in India in 9 out of 10 previous years preceding that year, or he has during 7 previous years preceding that year been in India for an aggregate period of 729 days or less. If a resident satisfied any of these two conditions, then he become NOR. If we reverse these conditions, if a person satisfy both of these conditions, that he is resident in 2 out of 10 years and his stay in 7 preceding years is 730 days or more, then he become ordinary resident. Now these are the provisions with respect to NOR as existing on date. Now look at how the government wanted to change this in the finance bill. When the finance bill was introduced in February this year, they wanted to make it very simple. Both these conditions of 9 out of 10 and 729 days were proposed to be removed, and a simple sentence of an individual who has been a non-resident in India in 7 out of 10 previous years preceding that year, that person would have become a not ordinary resident. They wanted to simplify it and they wanted to relax it as well. But when this was finally passed by the parliament and when it became a law, then massive changes happened, occurred to this condition. Look at this, how big NOR provision 6.6 with respect to individual has become. Now there are three clauses, A, C, and D. B relates to HUF, so we are not covering this. A is the same condition, that 9 out of 10 previous years and 729 in 7 previous years. This is the same as it was there in 1961 Act. Now the two conditions which have been added are C and D. C says a citizen of India or a PIO having total income other than income from foreign sources exceeding 15 lakh rupees during the previous year as referred to in explanation 1B, and who has been in India for a period of periods amounting in all to 120 days or more, but less than 182 days. Such a citizen of PIO who is covered by 1B, that who is covered by 1B, citizen of PIO who is visiting India and his Indian source income is 15 lakh or more, that person will become NOR if his stay is between 120 to 181 days. Why 120 and 182 days? 120 because from 120 he will become a resident as per section 61C, we have seen that. And if he crosses 180, if it touches 182 days, then he will become resident as per subsection 1, which we discussed at the beginning. So if the stay of such a citizen of PIO lies between 120 to 181 days, then he will be considered as not ordinary resident. So his income will, in scope of income will be relaxed. Now this clause D, this is the most important thing which the government has done. It says that a citizen of India who is deemed to be resident under clause 1A, that person will be considered as not ordinary resident. Who are those 1A? 1A are the deemed resident. Let me look back. 1A. 1A are those citizen of India having India sourced income of 15 lakh and income is not taxable in any other country. These individuals are deemed as resident of India, and because of this newly inserted clause D to subsection 6.6, they will be considered as not ordinary resident. There is no if and but to this condition, my friends. Whenever a person falls under 1A, automatically he will become NOR. There will be no question for 1A deemed resident for becoming ordinary resident. They will always be considered as not ordinary resident. And for 1A, there is no time threshold, as I mentioned earlier. Even if he stay for a single day in India or throughout the year, a person may fall under 1A and then he will automatically become not ordinary resident. So if we read section 161A, deemed residence, vis-a-vis 66D, then it creates a very interesting scenario. Why they have kept 1A people into NOR category, the logic of the government or the legislature might be that these are those people who are living abroad. We are making them resident, but let's do not tax their foreign income because they are living abroad. They might be earning a lot of income abroad. Why should we tax them? We are deeming them resident. Let's tax their own India sourced income only. Fine. But this will create a scenario where a person who was already taxable in India under the old law, he will get out of the tax net. This I will explain in my issue number 1. Before that, let me summarize these clause C and D in this slide. Section 66C applies to Indian citizen and PIO who are visiting India and they stay between 120 to 181 days and they have India source income of 15 lakh. Then 66C applies and those citizen and PIO become not ordinary resident. 66D applies to Indian citizen. It does not apply to PIO. They have India source income of 15 lakh as 66C, plus their income is not taxable in India. There is no condition of stay in India for 66D or 61A deemed resident. They may stay in India, they may not stay in India, but they will become not ordinary resident. With this, now I move on to issue number 1. For deemed resident people, whether their foreign income is taxable or not. Let me summarize what I have discussed with respect to 61A and 66D. 61A is a new clause which specifically overrules 61. So for 61 people, there is no requirement of a time threshold. That person should be Indian citizen. He should have India source income of 15 lakh and he should not be liable to tax in any other country. This is the precondition. Then he will be deemed resident under 61, irrespective of his stay in India. And by virtue of 66D, such deemed resident will always be treated as NOR. It means that 61A people will not have to pay tax on their foreign source income because as I discussed in when I was talking about 5.1, that foreign sourced income is not taxable for NOR. Only those foreign sourced income are taxable which is with respect to a business or profession controlled from India. Rest of the foreign source income are not taxable. Now let's try to understand this with the help of an example. So my example contains Mr. A. He is citizen of India. He stays in India whole of the year. Throughout the year he was in India, and assume he never visited abroad. Means for the past 10 years he was in India. He was always a resident of India. He has in the relevant year he has India source income of 20 lakh, means more than 15 lakh, and his foreign he also has some foreign income, say 50 lakh rupees, which is not taxed abroad. Which country he belongs to, I'm not going into that argument. Why foreign income is not getting taxed, I'm not also going into that argument because the law presupposes that there may be a possibility that foreign source income is not taxable in India. So with these hypothetical example, now look at what will be the residential status and scope of total income of Mr. A under the old law and under the new law. First, look at position under the old law. Since he was staying in India throughout the year, so in a way his stay is obviously more than 182 days. So section 61 applies. His stay is more than 182 days. He will become resident of India. I'm talking about the old law. Now under the old law, if you are resident, then you need to further examine whether you are NOR or OR. Since he never visited abroad, means he always remained in India, so he was resident in 2 out of 10 previous years, and also his stay in 7 preceding years was more than 730 days. Obviously, then what is the implication? Then section 66A does not apply on him, and he is not NOR, he is ordinary resident. What will be the result of such case? He is ordinary resident. If he is ordinary resident, and if we read ordinary resident with section 5.1, his global income becomes taxable in India. And if we apply this on his income, so his taxable income for that year will be 70 lakh, 20 lakh India sourced income, 50 lakh foreign sourced income. That foreign source income is getting taxed in abroad or not, that's a subject matter of the tax treaty. But as per the domestic law, his global income is taxable and he will pay tax on 70 lakh. There is no argument, there is no dispute with respect to this conclusion, and we were used to and we were very much habitual to this result. Now look at how this will play under the new law, under 1A. His stay in India is more than 182 days. So section 6.1 applies to him. Section 6.1 is still remains there in the new law. So he satisfies the first condition of 6.1, more than 182 days. But he is an Indian citizen, plus he has India sourced income, which is more than 15 lakh, plus he is not liable to tax in any other country. It means he will be covered by 6.1A as well. And since 6.1A has overruling powers on 6.1, so he will be deemed as resident under 6.1. What does this mean? This means that he will also automatically fall under 6.6D, means he will become not ordinary resident. So what will be his residential status? His residential status will be not ordinary resident. What does this mean with respect to section 5.1? For NOR, foreign source income are not taxable in India unless until this relates to business control from India. So his 50 lakh of foreign sourced income, which was rightly getting taxed under the old law, that will not be taxed under the new law. He will pay tax only on 20 lakh rupees of income. Now, friends, look at from this perspective. Section 6.1A does not say that whether you should stay in India or not. It simply says you should be a citizen of India. Now look at a person, say um, a person's working at a senior position in an MNC. His income is 1.5 lakh per month, means more than 15 lakh. He stays in India. He don't visit India or don't visit abroad or visit abroad for only for a small period of time. If that person has some foreign source income as well, that person will always fall under 6.1A, and that person will always be treated as NOR, and he will no more be required to pay tax on his foreign sourced income. He will only be liable to pay tax only on India sourced income. Though the legislature created this new provision 6.1A with 6.6D to tax those citizens who are living abroad, but the way they have worded it will cover those people who are already living in India and they were paying their taxes on their global income. So there may be a scenario some of the people might escape the tax net. I'm sure that might not be the objective of the legislature, but this is how the law is worded, and might be the government will take note of it and they might bring some clarification, or they might bring in some changes in the way 6A and 6.6D are worded. With this, I now move on to issue number 2, and that is the last topic for my discussion. So that this issue is that will the tiebreaker clause of DTA will be relevant for those people who are deemed as resident under clause 1A. Now look at example of an Indian citizen who stays outside India. His stay in India is zero. He don't visit India. He's just a citizen, but he stays in US. He will be deemed the resident of India if his Indian income is 15 lakh and he is not liable to tax in any other country. Now that person now become resident of India. Now if he tries to take recourse of the tax treaty, now as I mentioned earlier, to take recourse of the tax treaty, Article 1 says you should be resident of either of the countries, at least one of the countries. Now the way residential clause under the most of the Indian DTAs are worded, it says an individual is resident if under the laws of that state or that country, he is liable to tax therein by reason of his domicile, residence, or any other similar criteria. So mind you, citizenship is not a condition over here. To become a resident under the tax treaty, a person should be liable to pay tax in that country because of his domicile, means he is living there, or residence, he has a residence over there, or any other similar criteria. So similar criteria, these words should take color from domicile and residence. Obviously, this is the law of interpretation. So if a citizen who never stays in India, it means he do not have any domicile in India, he do not have any residence in India, similar other criteria does not cover citizenship, then does this mean that he will not become resident as per the treaty? Answer seems to be yes. And if he is not resident of a contracting state of which he wants to take benefit, then how the tiebreaker clause will apply? Because tiebreaker clause applies only on those cases where a person become resident of both the countries as per Article 4.1. If 4.1 first and does not apply, then how could the tiebreaker clause will be applicable? So does this mean that a person who is deemed as resident under Article 4, under Section 6.1a, then he cannot take benefit of the treaty? Might be it's a matter of litigation, might be some clarity will come by way of circular from the government, or might these terms domicile, residence, or other similar criteria examined by the courts, they throw more light on what should be the implications of domicile and residence, whether the term resident should include resident, whether other similar criteria should include citizenship. Time will tell. But as of now, it seems that a person who become deemed resident, then he cannot take benefit of the tiebreaker clause of the tax treaty.